Here's an update on striper fishing in the canal by East End Eddie Doherty, a retired Massachusetts court clerk magistrate appointed by the late Governor A. Paul Cellucci, author of 7 Miles After Sundown about surf casting the Cape Cod Canal for striped bass.
Welcome to another surf casting report on the world famous Cape Cod Canal. It's a crisp fall day here, and we got an east tide behind me here that will be turning slack soon and then be turning west, also known as the migration tide, because striped bass ride the west tide into Buzzards Bay on their migration route and continue south to Chesapeake Bay and the Hudson River and other places to spend the winter. So it's easier for them to ride a west tide, so that's why we call it the migration tide. So fishing was great in the beginning of October, and then it kind of died off, and but there was a lot of bait in the water, but the bait was small bait, silver sides and different what we call rain bait, because it looks like rain on the water because they're so small. And fishermen had to make adjustments because of that. I was fishing one day, I wasn't catching anything, and so I took a Super Strike little neck popper and I took the bucktail off. I put bucktails on the rear end of most of my surface plugs, and so with the little neck I took the bucktail off the rear, and that made for a smaller profile which resembled the bait much more closely. And I caught a dozen fish right after that. So you have to be able to make adjustments, and that's what a lot of fishermen did with the small bait in the water. So the fall run is probably over, but you just really never know. There could be stragglers left here and what we call holdover stripers, because they actually spend the winter here. But most of them have probably gone by now, but you just never know. There could be schools still north of Boston and outside of Cape Cod Bay. So at any given moment, they could come down the canal. We're hoping that when they do migrate, they come down the canal as opposed to taking the route around P-Town. And so some of the anglers who did well especially in the beginning of October and right around there, a slapshot Scotty Yule, he caught a 39-inch that exploded on his service plugs. Bruno D'Souza caught 5 striped bass one day, up to 33 inches on Al Gagg's Wacky Mac soft plastic jig on a west ebb tide. Bill and the Grill Proutus, great fisherman, caught a high-end slot in close to the Rip Rat Stone Bank on a Yozuri Hydro Minnow, and then he caught a 34-inch on a white guppy jobo. Rob Fish Sticks Pisa caught some nice over slots, a 36, 38-inch and a 40-inch, and 6-year-old Sage Nicholson continues to impress. She had her Wacky Mac working to the tune of a 39-inch and 34-inch stripers on a rising east tide. John Captain Morgan interrupted the breakfast of a 40-inch striper that weighed 26 pounds with a Green Mac Fish Lab. And Bloodhound Steve Colleran, great guy, was using his Wacky Mac Fish Lab on lots of fish, and he caught a bunch of fish, including a 35 and 40-inch. The Wacky Mac is kind of a crazy color. It doesn't even resemble any bait fish, but sometimes they're very effective, and in October they were working very well. Lou Pipe Dock Braga caught 4 above slots, including a 40-inch on an Al Gagg's white paddle-tail jig. We call Lou Pipe Dock because he's a plumber. He's a great guy. Ben the Potato Manager Sivanen caught a 34-inch just before low slack. John Doble had some above slots with his white Magic Swimmer. I caught a 36-inch on a Yozuri Hydro Monster Shot. What a mouthful that is. It's a great lure, though. And I also caught a 35-inch on a yellow Super Strike little neck popper. Jiggin' Jimmy Rakowski, a nice guy from Falmouth, pulled a slot off the bottom in a fast-moving east tide with a soft plastic paddle-tail jig. Kathy Tang outfished the boys around her again with a 34-inch and a 41-inch one day. And her husband Coon also had some nice fish. They're a great couple from New York that stay here for a few months. Glenn Lucky Cigar Lindsay had a half a dozen fish and a slot that he took home for the table. And he also had a 35-inch with a left hook pencil on the surface. Paulie the Painter Gravina, a great lure maker, nice guy, and terrific fisherman. He had several fish, including a 31, 38-inch and a 47-inch monster. He used one of his handmade pink soft plastics, and that 47-inch was a really nice fish. So Jumpin' Joe England and Mash P. Mike Larea both were good for 37-inch fish. Tim Hollywood Petrarca and Bob Freshy Aqua Fresca caught 35-inch fish. And congratulations to Hollywood Petrarca. He just became a first-time new grandfather, and he actually caught fish. He caught a fish on the day that his new granddaughter Chloe was born, so he took that for a good sign and told me it was an omen. And I told him I wouldn't be surprised if Chloe learns how to tie a Palomar knot before she learns her ABCs. So Eli Winslow caught some over slots. And the next day I went back to the same, I was fishing next to Eli. I went back the next day and caught some fish in the same spot. Westport Jim Almeida caught a half a dozen fish up to 38 inches that were really far out past mid-canal. He was using a happy as a clam, which cast great. And like I said, the biggest one was 38 inches. So those fish were pretty far out. He worked to get those, and he makes nice casts. Larry Silvestri and Bob Dyer, excuse me, are members of the Canal Sportsman's Club, and they were both fishing together in one of their favorite spots, and it was on Larry's 85th birthday. Larry's a great guy, and it was perfect timing because Larry caught a 36-inch striped bass on his birthday. And Larry's been fishing the canal since he was a little kid, and I think he's fished more spots in the canal than anybody I know, and a great fisherman and a good guy. Bill Slots Walsh got into a mix of bass and bluefish and caught a 38-inch striped bass with a Spro white bucktail 2 hours into the east turn. And Mike Peaches Pelly, a Brockton guy, caught 4 bonito. He was throwing a white paddle tail. Peaches is a good guy. Keith OFD Dacey, OFD originally from Dorchester, prior to Boston, caught a half dozen slots over and over on the tail end of an east tide. And the Keegans were killing it. The Keegan brothers, there's 3 of them. They were catching so many fish one week they lost count. A lot of fish. George Keegan caught a fish that was a little more than 32 pounds. It measured out to 48 inches. Sean caught a nice fish that was just under 30 pounds. And their brother Joe, Sean told me Joe doesn't bother measuring or weighing fish, but Sean said he caught a fish bigger than his. So they did terrific. Congratulations to the brothers Keegan. The most unusual catch of the month was Everyday Al Mazzico caught a 76-inch sturgeon. It was swimming through a rip, and Al hooked it with a bucktail. This is like a prehistoric fish. The sturgeon doesn't even have scales, it has plates. So I told Everyday Al that he now qualifies to star in another Jurassic Park movie after catching that monster. And the catch of the month was made by 16-year-old Matt McNeil from Norfolk. He battled a 48-pound striped bass for over 15 minutes and swallowed a green mac fish lab. And the 48-pounder measured out to 50 inches, 50 inches, big fish. And during the fight, it just kept taking line and making that noise we love to hear in the drag. Zzz, zzz. It was just running with line into a rising east slack. So congratulations to 16-year-old Matt. He's a great kid. Just a few announcements. If you're in the East End now, there's heavy equipment, and they're working on a sand replacement operation. They're pumping sand through a pipe out of the canal and into, I think, Scusset Beach, or one of those beaches there. The good news is that the Cranberry Highway has now been paved and is complete. For a while there, even after they paved the first part of it, to put the initial macadam on there, there were raised manhole covers all over the place. When you drove down there, it was like going through a minefield trying to dodge these things. So I'm happy that that's complete, because a lot of guys, including myself, use the Cranberry Highway to get to the canal. You end up on the west end. And that project, I mean, they took forever. When they started that project, my hair was brown, okay? So I'm just glad it's finished. So I got a call that there's a bunch of surf casters that fish the canal, and they live in Connecticut. And so I got a call one day because they were all having breakfast together at some breakfast place in Connecticut. And so there's a guy sitting in there having breakfast that they don't know, but they think that it's me. Apparently this guy looked a lot like me. So somebody yells, East End Eddie's in the house. And so anyways, I told them it wasn't me. And they sent me a picture of this guy, and the poor guy does look like me, unfortunately for him. But anyways, it wasn't me. I was packing my gear in my car one day after fishing, getting ready to leave, and Steve Murray, a great fisherman, stops by, and he stopped his truck near my vehicle, and he just talking to me out the window, and he says, "Any fish today, Eddie?" I said, "No, nothing, Steve." I said, "But that could all change tomorrow." And he immediately said, "It could change in an hour." And you know what? He's right, because the canal is just got so many variables to it that you just never know, and can produce at the drop of a hat. You just never know when things are going to change. I was fishing on the Cape side one day next to Aptuxet, at Aptuxet, and there's a guy standing next to me fishing, nice guy, and he's a really long caster. He was throwing some lures out there really, really far. And then a big sailboat goes by, and then he takes another cast, and all of a sudden, zzz, zzz, you hear his drag go off. So I said to the guy, "Geez, sounds like I got a good fish on." He says, "No, it's not a fish. I just hooked that sailboat." So the sailboat was heading towards Buzzards Bay, and he had to cut the line. So the owner of the sailboat got a free lure that day. So my tip of the month is, if you're on your way to the canal, and especially if you're in the New Bedford area or on that side of the area, and you're hungry, go to Grandma's Donuts and get the best donuts you've ever had in your life. So Grandma's Donuts used to be situated in Buzzards Bay, born right around this area before I moved around here. And a lot of my friends used to go there. They swore by the place. It was the greatest donut place, Ma's Donuts. And then it became Grandma's Donuts, which is what it is in New Bedford now. And if you want the best jelly donut you've ever had, stop by that place, because I've done it many times myself. And the good news is that they're open late on Saturday night after midnight into Sunday morning. So if you're on your way to the canal on Sunday morning, they'll be open. So I want to wish you well, and have a safe and happy holiday season and a great winter. When it gets cold in the winter, you want to think about fishing reports like this to try to help take the chill off of winter. And enjoy the holidays, and God willing, I'll see you in the spring.
Want your nice canal catch mentioned? Email the details to eastendeddie789@yahoo.com.